Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV listeners and radio listeners as well. My name is Jerome and I am the Sane Environmentalist. Today is going to be all Fukushima just about. We've got a whole bunch of new information coming out from the Fukushima Daiichi power plant and the absolute disaster we have there. A good source of information is a site called simplyinfo.org. That's fukuleaks.org is the domain name. They're absolutely incredible. They've got really good, up-to-date, pertinent information. I'm going to start out by talking about the contaminated soil situation that we have at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant and really across all of eastern Japan. They have a real issue. The new interim storage site designed for longer-term storage of radio-contaminated soil near the power plant has opened for business. The effort has been undertaken to move some of the massive caches of contaminated soil around Japan to be stored in the evacuation zone. Ashai Simbom published a photo of some of the established storage plots located adjacent to a river. Yes, you heard it right, a river. The photo shows some sort of surface preparation, looks like maybe concrete or packed clay going on. And this would not prevent at all the contamination that could leave the bags and migrate into the river, considering the massive amounts of contaminated soil to eventually be stored in this area. The proximity to the river is concerning. So that's one thing. And now we have TEPCO's magic truck. Okay. TEPCO recently presented a pump truck concept to Japan's Nuclear Regulatory Agency. The company is trying to use this concept as part of a case being made to allow them to restart the massive nuclear power plant, Kashizawa Kiriwa. TEPCO had previously installed filtered vent systems for Units 6 and 7 at the power plant as part of this restart upgrade process. The ability of these vent filters to solve all problems in the event of a severe accident has been criticized and is not totally foolproof. Vent filters, they are better than no filters, and it does offer another line of needed defense, but they will not solve all the risks of a severe accident. Now, TEPCO rolls out their pump truck concept. This seems even more questionable than the filtered vent concept. The truck appears to be a riff off of the flex pump and generator concept that the U.S. nuclear operators negotiated as a safety effort to avoid being forced to install filtered vents on their boiling water reactors. Their flex system has been questioned as being insufficient for combating a meltdown to its pump capacities. The portable pump and fire truck system may not be sufficient to provide enough cooling water volume or pressure to make a headway against the melting nuclear reactor core. TEPCO's magic truck would attempt to spray water into the containment structure as a priority rather than the reactor in hopes of cooling any fuel that may have already escaped the reactor pressure vessel. This would also attempt to cool the airspace in the containment structure to avoid overpressure damage. The capacity of water with these two trucks trucks could pump a minute has not been described in any public documents that have been found. This critical factor is what would determine if the system could overcome the incredible heat of a nuclear meltdown. It is not clear as well if the capacity would be capable of sufficiently cooling the steam condensing system and pressure buildup in containment. If it could not, then venting the containment to the environment is the only option to prevent massive containment failure. And we know how that works. This concept fails to take into consideration the potential for fuel particles to be sucked into the system from the suppression chamber. Reactor depressurization during a meltdown type of accident could purge fuel particles and fuel debris into the suppression chamber. These particles could then be pulled into this cooling system. This could cause a number of serious problems. There could be potential of a criticality. This is where nuclear fuel is collected in the right amount and shape to set off a nuclear reaction. Think Unit 3 of the Fukushima Daiichi plant. The nuclear incident at the Tokai Nuclear Fuel Facility in Japan 99 is an example of a criticality accident. Having such a thing happen on top of a reactor accident would be a dire complication. Other potential problems include having a high radiation field build up along the water lines and in the pump trucks being used. It could make the system in the trucks too dangerous to approach, or could give workers that work on these trucks an unanticipated high radiation dose. The system also brings reactor water outside of the existing hardened safety systems. Should a connection to the pump truck experience a failure, this water could be released to the outside. Japan's NRA is taking public comments on the truck concept this month before they decide if the system will be included in their decision-making for a potential restart of their plants. Just really ugly. So they've got these big pump trucks that are going to basically use to cool the reactors. Just really, really, really ugly situation. I saw a video just yesterday of they've got one of their robots actually inside of Unit 3 to look around, and they managed to get up underneath the pedestal. The pedestal is the supporting platform that the reactor vessel sits on, and looking up towards the bottom of the reactor vessel, you can clearly see that the control rod, where the control rods are inserted into the reactor pressure vessel from below. There's a brilliant plan in itself, you know. When all the fuel melted down, it basically melted right through the graphite seals and it melted the control rods as well. And so the nuclear fuel just poured through the holes, and everything below there is covered with spatters of this yellowish orange colored material that is clearly fuel that spattered and then stuck and hardened. And the concrete of the containment vessel, you can see it is falling and chipping apart and falling apart. So basically the concrete containment vessel, which is pretty much the only thing holding the radiation back at this point as well, is starting to chip and fall apart. They managed to get down to the base of the containment vessel, where they found a giant pile of melted fuel, and the robot got close enough to it, and you could literally see the water boiling where the fuel was collected, i.e. the fuel is hot enough still to boil water almost 7 years later. It still risks a prompt criticality and a recriticality. This is an ugly situation. Here's another good one. Kobe Steel has had a scandal that is involved in the incinerator and the fuel casks they're using for storage and transport of the spent, damaged fuel at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant. A data falsification scandal hit Japan's Kobe Steel in recent weeks. The company admitted widespread falsification of data related to quality control in metals products provided to various customers. Kobe cited a set of copper pipes provided to TEPCO for Fukushima as being among the questionable parts. TEPCO claims the parts were never used. Another report cited non-used pipes were actually delivered to Fukushima Daiichi. Back in 2013, Kobe Steel provided 19 spent fuel storage casks to the Fukushima Daiichi plant. These were used to remove spent fuel from the common pool and then stored in temporary storage facilities up on the hill at the disaster site. While Kobe hasn't come out to the press and explicitly admitted these casks were part of the data falsification scandals, the company is now admitting it was commonplace and went back decades. We currently do not know the total number of casks Kobe Steel has provided to Fukushima Daiichi. If these casks potentially have substandard steel in them or flawed production practices, this could be a considerable problem at the disaster site if the casks are found now or later to have structural integrity problems. That could lead to cracking or leaks. This would have a very serious safety risk to anywhere near the casks, or for that matter, anywhere on the island. The concept of dry fuel cask storage is inherently dependent on the integrity of the cask to anyone nearby safe, to keep everyone nearby safe and to prevent dangerously deadly high radiation levels. They are continuing to look to see how many more casks Kobe Steel may have provided to Fukushima Daiichi before or after the disaster. If even the 19 casks already identified need to be pulled out of storage, brought to the common pool, inspected, and potentially replaced, this could significantly delay spent fuel removal from the reactors. Workers and worker space related to the spent fuel management are limited. Space in the common pool was expanded in recent years by moving some of the stored fuel in that facility to dry cask storage up on the hill. Requiring the fuel be brought back to the common pool would cause even more storage space to be used. The cask handling area for the common pool is somewhat limited. This area is where casks would need to be unloaded and inspected in order to determine any problems with the casks or facilitate moving the fuel to a new storage casks. Kobe Steel's construction and fabrication company built the radioactive waste incinerator, now in operation at Fukushima Daiichi. So far, no admissions of the incinerator being involved in the scandal has been explicitly admitted. The facility was recently constructed and went online last year. If these products provided to Fukushima Daiichi are found to be involved in the falsification scandals, it would create problems for the safety and oversight of these systems, and potential delays as equipment is inspected and possibly replaced. Other safety-related systems could potentially be impacted. As of now, we do not know how many other systems have been identified as being provided by Kobe Steel, but they are a key supplier to the nuclear industry in Japan. Moving on, TEPCO reactors are facing even more setbacks. TEPCO and the decommissioning authorities have reported on the ongoing delays at the Fukushima Daiichi plant. As Simply Info did review, these reports were found that units 1 through 3 have each run into challenges and that have further delayed work towards stabilization. Let's go over the units one by one. Unit 1's refueling floor cleanup has already been significantly delayed. Preparation work took longer than anticipated as workers tried to prevent radioactive dust from blowing off the building. It was reported back in 2015 when a set of temporary doors were installed on what remained of the first floor overhead door area. An elaborate set of water spray heads were added in 2016 to keep the dust down, and industrial vacuum cleaners were added to pick up the fine dust. As workers began to remove the top layers of debris, they found the large concrete slabs of the reactor well were broken. These slabs were usually lifted using a crane attached to large cleats in each slab. With the slabs broken, they will need to develop a safe way to grab and remove these huge slabs. Concrete dust from these pieces of equipment and others that will need to be broken apart are of high concern. Concrete dust is easily caught in the wind and also, in many cases, contains significant amounts of radiation. These challenges have caused TEPCO and the decommissioning authorities to delay the removal of spent fuel from Unit 1's pool by about 3 years. Unit 2. New work has begun on Unit 2. Robotic heavy equipment is removing roof tiles from Unit 2. This work is in preparation for removing the roof from the building. Unit 2 will eventually have a cover building installed for the removal of spent fuel. During the time period between the roof being removed and the cover being installed will be the highest risk for contamination to the environment. TEPCO says they will use water spray and vacuums to keep the dust down. This doesn't do anything for the ongoing releases from the reactor itself. Before a filtration system was put on the refueling floor blowout panel on Unit 2, this reactor discharged the bulk of the contamination to the air from the plant site. TEPCO has not documented a method to control this kind of release as they remove the roof and install the cover building. Unit 3. The cover building for Unit 3 has progressed slowly. It took almost 2 months to install one section of the modular cover building. The need for workers to manually bolt some portions of these modules in place may have contributed to the delays. Radiation levels on the refueling floor are considerably high. Additional shielding was added to help protect workers, but this work is still causing high exposures. The final report on the muon scale for Unit 3 was published recently. It confirms earlier SCAM results that showed there was no substantial amount of fuel left in the reactor vessel. TEPCO noted that there might be some residues in the bottom of the vessel, but they could not tell for sure. Early inspection work inside of Unit 3's containment showed that the reactor vessel suffered a slow melt-through failure onto the pedestal, what I was talking about a few minutes ago. This included a series of small failure points where the fuel leaked down through the control rod structures and fell onto the pedestal. This method of failure provides clues as to how the phases of the meltdown took place and also how the melting fuel may have interacted and migrated once in containment. These various delays will push much more major work and will push much of the major work until after the Olympic Games in Tokyo. There is speculation that this is by design for political reasons. The delays cited by TEPCO and the decommissioning authorities do not have merit and could create significant delays. So, Simply Info, Fukushima update from the 25th of September 2017. A number of individual events have taken place recently. We review them here. Communities rebuilding after the 3/11 earthquake have developed microgrids that take part of the energy use in their communities off the grid. This allows for more power stability and the ability for the community to keep power on when there are grid blackouts. Fueled by various renewable energy sources, these new community power plants show the waning dominance of big regional power utilities in Japan. A significant court ruling has been handed down in one of the many Fukushima-related court cases. This new ruling confirms that people's loss of community, existing jobs, and businesses are fully losses that there have not been compensated for and to date. The ruling also stated that TEPCO's declaration that various towns have been reopened and that this relieves them of the responsibility for further damages was not valid. This latter portion of the ruling is significant as the rush to reopen towns has been a large part of the government effort to try to make this disaster go away. Creative interpretations of the radiation levels in the evacuated communities were used to deem them safe. Reopening a community will now absolve TEPCO of responsibility for damages. So now I would like to play back an interesting YouTube video, the audio portion of it from Awareness Studio. It's 20 minutes long, and the name of the video is Fukushima Question. Fukushima, is it an accident or an act of war? Please listen.
Is walk people through why Fukushima was impossible. If you can open up link number 11.
Okay.
And it's the real emergency backup systems. One thing that people don't realize about Fukushima and nuclear power in general is your backup systems, the electrical backup systems, your diesel generators are pretty much only there to keep business as usual. The real emergency backup systems at a nuclear facility don't need any electricity at all to function. And that's why Fukushima was impossible. The swapping of the external generators by the tsunami was irrelevant because the real emergency backup systems are driven by steam from the reactors themselves. So in other words, when your power goes offline and your steam that's normally coming out of that reactor to turn your turbine, when you don't need that power and you can't turn that generator anymore because the reactor is putting out too much, putting out too much should be putting through an idle generator without overspinning it. You enter in emergency backup mode, and that steam is used to spin cooling pumps that cool the reactor off. So losing your diesel generators to spin electrical cooling pumps is irrelevant if you're supposed to have backup steam turbine pumps that do the exact same job.
Actually, that's brilliant. That makes a lot of sense. You're sure going to have plenty of steam.
There's no way Fukushima could have... You know, when Fukushima blew up, when Fukushima got hit by the tsunami, and everybody, I heard on the news that a nuclear plant got hit by a tsunami, my thought was why does that matter? Because I understood reactor systems good enough so that I knew that couldn't cause any problem at all. The only thing you're going to do when you kick off all electricity to that nuclear power plant, what is supposed to happen is the steam from that reactor is supposed to start powering pumps rather than turn a generator. Well, the problem is that at reactors 1, 2, and 3, all fueled reactors, those systems activated immediately, just like they should when the generator went off, when the generator is cut off. The trouble is that within 11 minutes at reactor 1, that system shut itself off, and the only way that it can shut itself off is if it gets a powered command from the controller to shut itself off. Well, then here we get into Stuxnet. This Magna BSP company came out of Dimona, Israel, where Stuxnet was written. And if you go back to let me see. I've got the links for this here. I've got to get back to that page. Oh, I'm not on that page anymore. Anyway, there's
number 20.
a link.
Stuxnet is documented as number 20.
Yes, Stuxnet is documented to have been written by the Israeli Defense Forces. Those 3 links are critical because everybody has been saying, well, we don't know where Stuxnet came from. Well, the Israelis have bragged about and celebrated and videos on YouTube and everything about writing Stuxnet and destroying Iran's nuclear program with it. Well, 4 months later, after Japan offers to enrich uranium for Iran, out of the exact same, within a mile of where Stuxnet was written, here comes a security company and gets access to the heart of Fukushima. Well, Japan obviously is an enemy now, and they need to be taken out every bit as bad as Iran. This security company, because I didn't get an admission from them directly, you'll never get an admission that they actually stuck a flash drive in one of those PLCs to infect Fukushima with this virus. But I did get the proof in an article written in the Jerusalem Post that they had a full-time, unauthorized data connection to the heart, to the SCADA system in that facility via a connection that they had made to one of their cameras, one of their nuke cameras in that facility. So here we have the security company having a totally unauthorized data connection into the heart of Fukushima, into the reactor rooms, and all those SCADA systems are interlinked. And it could have probably jumped out of Fukushima and gone over to some of the other reactors that acted up after the tsunami too, which is impossible. But they had other reactors have problems, and it's virtually impossible. Well, these emergency systems activated at Fukushima. That's the bottom line. And all 3 reactors, they activated. At Reactor 1, they cut off after 11 minutes. And Reactor 1 promptly went into meltdown because if you cut off those emergency systems within the 3 hours of shutting a reactor down, the reactor will, even though it's been scrammed and it's not doing anything to perpetuate a chain reaction, just the breakdown of some of the highly radioactive isotopes will keep that reactor hot and keep it generating heat. So you need those cooling pumps running to prevent a meltdown, even though the reactor is shut off. At Reactor 1, that system was told to shut off outside the control of the operators, and the operators couldn't get it to turn back on 11 minutes after the generators cut off. With Reactor 2, those systems shut down 3 hours after the electricity was lost. And at Reactor 3, those systems shut down on day 2. They shouldn't ever shut down because you know how a semi functions, it has air pressure, and as long as it has air pressure, the brakes are off.
Right.
When you release air pressure on a semi, when your brakes are failed, it means that they're on. If you have a brake problem with a semi, those brakes are on. With a brake problem with a car, they're off. But with a brake problem with a semi, that truck is so dangerous that its default mode is the brakes have to be told to shut off. This emergency backup system at Fukushima actually needs a powered command to keep it from activating. And the fact that it did activate means that in that facility, something still had power and fed those valves the signal they needed to shut off. Well, Magna VSP bragged to the Jerusalem Post after Reactor 3 had exploded that they maintained a full-time data connection to their cameras all the way through in that reactor.
And that's 24, number 24 for those listening.
Yes. That page is, my internet's down right now. It's a long story, but I've been having lots of problems since I typed this article, and it's a long story. I don't want to get into that.
Yeah, okay.
So I just got to kind of wing it now. But the only way so here we have power dead of this facility. Batteries die in 8 hours, and there's so many things. They actually brought in generators from off-site before the backup batteries to turn the cooling pumps died. They have backup batteries there. They actually brought in off-site power and they had sufficient power available there within 8 hours of that. The roads were in perfect shape because there was no earthquake. They managed to drive these huge generators in, and when they tried to hook them up, the switchgear would not let them turn on the power to the facility. Well, all these systems are linked in to the SCADA system that can be infected by Stuxnet. So here's a system telling them that they can't activate this power that they brought in. You can't get the switches to work. The only way that can happen is the controller telling it not to activate. There are so many aspects to this story. So we have the regular, the standard steam-powered backups not working. We have the electrical backups not working, and the generators, one of those generators actually kept running, and one was enough to keep that facility safe. It kept running even despite the other ones cutting off, which never got flooded, but because they're in the turbine room, that's another story. You have to read the article at Fukushima, jimstonefreelance.fukushima, or /Fukushima.html. You have to read that article to get all this. But here we have a facility where power's been brought in, they can't hook it up. They got a generator working, the switchgear is telling it you can't use it. They've got emergency backup systems that are functioning, and they shut off all by themselves. Well, with a data link leaving, and so here is a scenario that I think really happened at Fukushima. And I'm just going to read this because I've got it really well written. I'm going to read it straight off the site.
Okay.
I've got the backup here running. I honestly believe that Japan is being held a nuclear hostage. It all makes sense. Number one, Japan offers to enrich uranium for Israel's Great State in Iran. Number two, immediately Israel sets up front companies masquerading as security companies, and one of them succeeds in getting a security contract at a Japanese nuclear facility. 4 months later, the Dimona dozen shows up, and under the cover of a security contract, gets unlimited access to the heart of Fukushima. They plant the virus, install real cameras outside the facility, and functional, poorly disguised new cameras inside the facility. In addition to this, they install unauthorized data connection to allow control of all the guts of the facility via the virus. And they admitted this to this connection in an article in the Jerusalem Post. After installing Stuxnet and the nukes, they scram. Israel waits for one of the many natural quakes, which is how I wrote the article. And I only came up with this information about the possibility of creating earthquakes this morning. The tsunami comes in, swamps Stuxnet. Okay. Israel waits for one of the many natural quakes in Japan to provide cover for the tsunami bomb, and they already have the nuke at the bottom of the Japan Trench. VLF communications are established for the bomb to penetrate the water. David and Dimona get seismic readings from Japan. 6.67 in progress. Boom. Tsunami comes in and swaps the Stuxnet-infected power plant, and direct video feed from legitimate cameras they installed gets back to David and Dimona via a totally unauthorized channel, and David knows just when to cut the generators off. Others on the team do all they can to counteract emergency measures taken by the employees at Fukushima, who are unaware an attack is taking place and do not understand why everything is going crazy. Israeli Prime Minister calls Japan and says, "Take that for offering to help Iran. And you know, there are 5 more nukes in the ocean off the coast of Japan, and we are going to set those off and destroy your coastal cities if you do not forget all about that 6.67 and say it was a 9 to cover for tsunami effects. And now we are going to make your people demand you move away from nuclear power so you can never threaten us like that again. We're going to blow up Fukushima, and you're just going to go along with whatever story we tell you." So David and his pals closed all the valves to the reactors via the remote link they admitted to installing and put them to full throttle to melt them down, while the virus keeps control room readouts displaying false info like nothing is going on, even though the place is coming apart. After enough mayhem ensued to provide plausibility, they set off the planted nukes and blow the place sky high. And that is how Reactor 4 is building 7. That's how you get a reactor that has been completely disassembled and cannot do anything to explode. And even though I didn't get every single detail, I think I've got enough, because the seismic data proves beyond a doubt that the quake was not what we were told and was in fact an inland 6.8. and which is calculated by that higher than the 6.67 that we talked about, because that seismic station is never going to be right at the epicenter, so they triangulated it to a 6.8. Numerous reference sources prove that Stuxnet really was written by Israel, and Japan really did offer to enrich uranium for Iran, and Israel has been documented to have already destroyed one nuclear program in Iran, and probably did. And Japan contributing to Iran's nuclear future would have made them just as much an enemy to Israel as Iran. Israel would want them taken out. It is documented that a team from Israel with history only consisting of working in Israeli defense got unlimited access to a Japanese nuclear facility, which then exploded. Reactor 4 had been defueled and proven disassembled, and therefore no explosion was possible. What should have happened at Reactor 4, if anything at all? The fuel pool should have melted down and caught fire once the water boiled off from a lack of recirculation at worst, and badly contaminated the containment structure. Nothing else. And and that's the thing, is the inside containment walls are like over 8 feet thick, probably 12 feet thick. I never could get the specification for that, but they blew so badly that Reactor 4 is in danger of falling over, and I'd like to know how that happened. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm just letting you know, so we get this all in. I want to get this all in.
And then the Japanese government is going along with the story of a scientifically proven false 9.0 earthquake. You can see the pictures, you can see the seismograms, nothing happened there other than a tsunami. There is a reason why they're going along with this story, and my guess is that Israel has made threats to wipe out Japan's coastal cities with additional tsunamis. If the government of Japan speaks a word of what went on, there should be no reason for Japan to go along with this crazy story other than a continued threat. Is it not interesting that this quake happened, at the bottom of the Japan Trench? I only found out that it really, they were saying that it happened at the bottom of the Japan Trench, but when you map out where this nuke actually went off by their star in the ocean, it's not in the Japan Trench. It's about 20 miles inland, closer to the land from the Japan Trench. Now, here we get the kicker. The Department of Homeland Security canceled a meeting about Stuxnet at TakedownCon. TakedownCon is a conference where it's an industrial conference where industrial facility operators get to know or learn about how to secure their facilities. The Department of Homeland Security has advised the cancellation of all discussion of Stuxnet. And my belief, for the reason for that, is because they want to keep the threat alive. They want this thing out there, so our reactors are vulnerable to it, so they can get their disasters here. And I guess we're getting kind of close to the end of the program, so I'm just going to let people go at that. Consider that we need such a massive awareness on this subject just to prevent a disaster in this country, because they're not picking favorites. They want dominance, they want control, and it doesn't matter who they hurt or what they do to get it. America has been a little bit too much of a rebel for them. They're pretty upset with this country. It didn't just fall over like Europe did. We are the last stand, and I really believe they have a plan for us that isn't pretty at all.
So I'm not sure exactly what to make of that. It seems rather far-fetched to me that Israel is behind that, but I could see the Stuxnet virus being part of the problems that they had after the plant was scrammed. Take that for what it's worth. I'm not endorsing or calling out the truth in any way. I am just putting it out there. For all you conspiracy theory people, try to prove it right or wrong. That's about all I can say on that. Here's another one regarding Fukushima. This one from Saturday, November 18th of this year. GE is being sued by the people of Japan for the Fukushima disaster. Japanese property owners and businesses near the Fukushima nuclear plant that melted down filed a $500 million class action lawsuit against General Electric for negligently designing the doomed plant. The lawsuit filed yesterday in federal court in Boston claims the explosions and releases of radioactive material at the reactors, likely the most costly industrial accident in history at $200 billion, were caused by GE's unsafe design of the reactors and further efforts to cut costs that also undercut safety during the construction of the plant. As a result of the accident, the area around Fukushima, according to the lawsuit, has become a ghost town. There are no people, roads are guarded by men in hazmat suits. No one will ever live there again, the lawsuit said. GE said in a statement that it became aware of the lawsuit today and is thoroughly reviewing the matter. The company pushed into the nuclear industry in the 1960s and offered a cheap reactor with significantly smaller but less safe containment than industry standards. That safety experts repeatedly raised concerns about. The lawsuit said that would be the Mark I boiling water reactor. GE designed all 6 reactors at Fukushima building, 2 on site, and advising on the construction of the rest. Original designs for the plant called for it to be built near a bluff 115 feet above sea level, but GE, to save money, lowered the bluff to 80 feet. Court papers say, and that dramatically increased the flooding risk. Backup systems in the event of a problem at the plant were also woefully lacking, causing the cooling system to fail, the suit also states. This was all done in an earthquake-prone region, the Japanese residents and business owners say. Fukushima was built on a 13-foot bluff with the plan to handle 10 to 10.5-foot waves, the lawsuit said. The March 2011 earthquake that crippled the power plant unleashed a 45-foot tsunami. The lawsuit follows the conclusion of 2 others this year in Japan against the power plant operator, Tokyo Electric, and the government. These resulted in payouts of $335,000 and $4.4 million for residents who were forced from their homes. And here's one from the New York Times, November 19th, 2017. It's titled, 6 Years After Fukushima, Robots Finally Find Reactors Melted Uranium Fuel. Japan, 4 engineers hunched over a bank of monitors, one holding what looks like a game controller. They had spent a month training for what they were about to do, pilot a small robot into the contaminated heart of the Fukushima nuclear plant. Earlier robots have failed, getting caught on debris or suffering circuit malfunctions from excess radiation. But the newer version, called the Mini Mambo, or Little Sunfish, was made of radiation-hardened materials with a sensor to help it avoid dangerous hotspots in the plant's flooded reactor buildings. The size of a shoebox, the Mambo used tiny propellers to hover and glide through the water in a manner similar to that of an aerial drone. After 3 days of carefully navigating through the shattered reactor building, the Mambo finally reached the heavily damaged Unit 3 reactor. Once there, the robot beamed back video of a gaping hole in the bottom of the reactor and on the floor beneath it, clumps of what looked like solidified lava. The first images ever taken of the plant's melted uranium fuel. The discovery in July at Unit 3 and similar successes this year in locating the fuel of the plant's other 2 ruined reactors mark what Japanese officials hope will prove to be the turning point in the worst atomic disaster since Chernobyl. The fate of the fuel had been one of the most enduring mysteries of the catastrophe, which occurred March 11, 2011, when an earthquake and 50-foot tsunami knocked out the vital cooling systems at the plant. Left to overheat, 3 of the 6 reactors melted down, their uranium fuel rods liquefied like candle wax. dripping to the bottom of the reactor vessel in a molten mass hot enough to burn through the steel walls and even penetrate the concrete floors below. No one knew for sure exactly how far these molten cores had traveled before desperate plant workers later celebrated as the Fukushima 50 were able to cool them again by pumping water into the reactor buildings. With the radiation levels so high, the fate of the fuel remained unknown. As officials became more confident about the management of the disaster, they began searching for the missing fuel. Scientists and engineers built radiation-resistant robots like the Manbo and a device like a huge X-ray machine that uses exotic space particles called muons to see the inside of the reactor. Now that engineers say they have found the fuel, officials of the government and the utility that run the plant hope to sway public opinion. Imagine that. 6.5 years after the accident spewed radiation over northern Japan and at one point seemed to endanger Tokyo, the officials hope to persuade a skeptical world that the plant has moved out of post-disaster crisis mode into something much less threatening, cleanup. Until now, we did not know exactly where the fuel was or what it looked like, said the general manager of the nuclear power division of the plant's operator, Tokyo Electric Power Company. Now we have seen it, we can make plans to retrieve it. TEPCO is keen to portray the plant as one big industrial cleanup site. About 7,000 people work there, building new water storage tanks, moving radioactive debris to new disposal sites, and erecting enormous scaffolding over the reactor buildings, torn apart by the huge hydrogen explosions that occurred during the accident. Access to the plant is easier than it was just a year ago when visitors still had to change into special protective clothing. These days, workers and visitors can move about but the most dangerous areas in street clothes. A TEPCO guide explained this was because the central plant grounds had been deforested and paved over, sealing in the contaminated soil. Imagine that. I think that paving doesn't really do much in the way of stopping neutrons or gamma. During a recent visit, the mood within the plant was noticeably more relaxed, though movements were still tightly controlled and everyone was required to wear radiation measuring badges. Inside a resting building, the worker ate in a large cafeteria and bought snacks in a convenience store. At the plant's entrance, a sign warned, "Games like Pokemon Go are forbidden within the facility." "We have finished the debris cleanup and gotten the plant under control," the guide said. "We are now preparing for decommissioning." In September, the Prime Minister's office set a target date of 2021 for the next significant stage when workers begin extracting the melted fuel from at least one of the 3 destroyed reactors, though they have not chosen which one. The government admits that cleaning up the plant will take at least another 3 to 4 decades and tens of billions of dollars. A $100 million research center has been built nearby to help scientists and engineers develop a new generation of robots to enter the reactor building and scoop up the melted fuel. At Chernobyl, the Soviets simply entombed the charred reactor in concrete after the deadly 1986 accident, but Japan has pledged to dismantle the plant and decontaminate the surrounding countryside, which was home to about 160,000 people who were evacuated after the accident. Many of them have been allowed to return as the rural towns around the plant have been decontaminated, but without at least starting a cleanup of the plant itself, officials admit they will find it difficult to convince the public that the accident is truly over. They also hope that beginning the cleanup will help them win the public's consent to restart Japan's undamaged nuclear plants, most of which remains shut down since the disaster. TEPCO and the government are treading cautiously to avoid further mishaps that could raise doubts that the plant is under control. They are being very methodical, too slow, some would say, in making careful effort to avoid any missteps or nasty surprises, said David Lochbaum, the director of the Nuclear Safety Project at the Union for Concerned Scientists, who is the co-author of a book on the disaster. They want to regain trust. They have learned that trust can be lost much more quickly than it can be recovered. To show the course followed by Mambo, TEPCO's Mr. Hirschel guided me inside the building containing the undamaged Unit 5 reactor, which is structurally the same as 2 destroyed reactors. He pointed out a spot on a narrow access ramp where 2 robots, including one that looked like a scorpion, got tangled in February by debris inside ruined Unit 2. Before engineers could free the scorpion, its monitor screen faded to black as its electronic components became overcome by radiation, which TEPCO said reached levels of 70 sieverts per hour. A dose of 1 sievert is enough to cause radiation sickness in a human. He then led me beneath the reactor onto what is called the pedestal. The bottom of the reactor looked like a collection of huge bolts, the access points for control rods used to speed up or slow down the nuclear reaction inside a healthy reactor. The pedestal was just a metal grating with the building's concrete floor visible below. The overheated fuel would have dropped from here and melted through the grating around here, he said, as we squatted to avoid banging our heads on the reactor bottom. The entire area around the reactor was dark and clustered with pipes and machinery. To avoid getting entangled, the Mambo took 3 days to travel some 20 feet to the bottom of Unit 3. To examine the other reactors, engineers built a snake robot which could thread its way through the wreckage, and the imaging device used muons, which can pass through most matter. The muon device has produced crude, ghostly images of the reactor's interiors. Extracting the melted fuel will present its own set of technical challenges and risks. Engineers are developing a new radiation-resistant robot at the Remote Technical Development Center. It includes a hangar-sized building to hold full-scale mock-ups of the plant and virtual reality room that simulates the interiors of the reactor buildings, including locations of known debris. I've been a robotic engineer for 20 years, and we've never faced anything like this, the director said. This is the divine mission for Japan's robot engineers. The divine mission. Wow. And to finish it up today, let's talk about that lawsuit I was talking about just a few minutes ago. I had mentioned that people had successfully sued the government and TEPCO. And this is another report by the New York Times dated October 10th. Tokyo. A district court in Fukushima, the site of the nuclear meltdowns in 2011 that caused thousands of people to evacuate their homes, ruled on Tuesday that the Japanese government and the electric utility that operated the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant must pay damages totaling roughly $4.4 million to 2,900 people. The ruling was the largest in about 30 similar lawsuits filed by about 12,000 former and current Fukushima residents. And it was awarded even though the majority of the plaintiffs did not flee the area in the aftermath of the disaster. Those people are pretty much sure to get cancer. Oh boy. It was the third case in which the court found that Tokyo Electric, the second to find the government negligent in not preventing the meltdown set off by a powerful earthquake in 2011. In the latest case, according to Japanese news reports, the court ruled that the government should have been able to anticipate a large tsunami in the region and should have forced Tokyo Electric to take preventative measures to protect its plant from catastrophic damages. The plaintiffs in the case sought a total of 16 billion yen in compensation to help pay for the cost of restoring their living environment. They also asked the court to force TEPCO to lower the rate of radiation in the area to an average of about 0.04 microsieverts per hour. That's lower than any background that I've ever seen in the United States. According to 3,000 monitoring posts throughout Fukushima Prefecture, the highest radiation dose was 9.48 microsieverts per hour near the plant on Tuesday, and the lowest was 0.03 microsieverts per hour in Iwaki City, about 33 miles away. The court awarded the plaintiffs a total of close to 498 million yen and denied the request to force the company to lower the average radiation dose. The plaintiffs and their lawyers issued a statement saying the ruling legally determined the negligence of both the government's nuclear policy and TEPCO, which supported a nuclear myth that put the priority on economic interests rather than safety. In a statement, TEPCO apologized again for the accident. They said, "We sincerely apologize again that the accident occurred at our Fukushima power plant and caused great trouble and concern to the people of Fukushima and others in society. We will review today's ruling by the Fukushima District Court and make a response." The meltdowns at the Fukushima Daiichi, which is on the east coast of Japan, occurred when a 32-foot wave overpowered the plant's protective seawalls. Isn't it funny? We've gone from 20 to 30 to 50 to 40. Nobody seems to know the actual size. Flooding buildings and destroying diesel-powered electricity generators, which is designed to keep critical systems functioning in a blackout. But TEPCO and the government said before the meltdowns that it did not have the power to force TEPCO to take protective anti-flooding measures, and that it was authorized to do so only by legislation passed after the accident. "We understand the court did not fully acknowledge the government's defense," said Kozira Okuhuma, manager of General Affairs Division of the Nuclear Regulation Authority. "We will now regulate power stations properly by applying the new regulation standard, which was created based on the nuclear accident." Get that, they will now regulate power stations properly. The key word being now, i.e. we are going to restart all of these nukes. In March, the utility and the government suffered their first legal setback in its litigation over the accident. In its ruling, the Meibishi District Court in Gunma Prefecture said that the disaster had been predictable and that it had been possible to prevent the accident. The court ordered the government and TEPCO to pay damages totaling 38 million yen, or about $335,000, to 62 residents who were evacuated from towns around the Fukushima plant and were relocated to Gunma. Each was rewarded a different amount, but the total worked out to be an average of 5,400 a person. The lawsuit filed by 137 former residents, and the court awarded damages to half of them. And to close things out, to make our happy day complete, I've got something here from the University of Hawaii, published November 8th, which says Fukushima radiation found in Hawaii fish, almost half contain fallout from Japan's nuclear disaster. 13 commonly consumed types of fish caught in North Pacific and locally available in Hawaii were analyzed by gamma spectrometry to measure for Fukushima-derived and historic cesium-137 and 134. All fish samples had detectable 137 levels above 90% confidence intervals. 3 out of the 13 had 134, an isotope indicative of Fukushima releases, 95% confidence interval. The highest 134 and 137 concentrations in the examined species was in ahi tuna, carrying plus or 0.1 to 0.04 becquerels per kilogram of radiocesium, and 0.6 plus or minus 0.05 becquerels per kilogram, respectively, of 134 and 137. Other samples with 134 cesium activities found above the 2 sigma uncertainty were albacore tuna and swordfish.